Japan's aircraft shocked the world in 1941, proving far more capable than Western intelligence ever imagined. And here's every major type that fought in the Pacific War. Fighters and Interceptors. Mitsubishi A6M-0, the legend, the icon, the aircraft that became synonymous with Japanese air power. When the Zero first appeared over China in 1940, it was untouchable, outmaneuvering every opponent with ease. Its incredible range allowed it to escort bombers on missions Western fighters could only dream of. Early in the Pacific War, the Zero achieved kill ratios of 12-1. But here's the tragedy. Japanese engineers sacrificed pilot protection for performance. No armor, no self-sealing fuel tanks. As the war progressed and American tactics evolved, the Zero's weaknesses became fatal. Yet even in 1945, in the hands of a skilled pilot, the Zero remained a deadly opponent. Over 10,000 were built, more than any other Japanese aircraft. Nakajima Ki-43 Hayabusa, the Army's answer to the Zero, and honestly, it was just as maneuverable, maybe even more so. The name means peregrine falcon, and it lived up to it. The Ki-43 could outturn almost anything in the sky, its lightweight and responsive controls making it a dogfighter's dream. Like the Zero, it traded protection for agility. In the hands of aces like Satoshi Anabuki, who scored 39 kills in one, the Hayabusa was devastating. It served on every front Japan fought on, from Burma to New Guinea, and remained in production until the war's end. Pilots loved its responsiveness, even if it couldn't protect them. Kawasaki Ki-61. Hien. Finally, a Japanese fighter that looked Western. The Hien used a licensed German Daimler-Benz engine, giving it a distinctive inline configuration, unlike the radial engines on most Japanese fighters. Allied pilots initially thought they were fighting Italian aircraft over New Guinea. The Ki-61 was faster than the Zero, better armored, and could dive with American fighters without its wings falling off. But that German engine was temperamental, prone to overheating in the Pacific climate. When it worked, the Hien was formidable, combining speed with decent protection. When it didn't, pilots were sitting ducks. Nakajima Ki-84 Hayate. If Japan had produced this fighter 2 years earlier, the air war might have been very different. The Hayate, meaning gale, was Japan's best all-around fighter of the war. It combined speed, maneuverability, firepower, and finally, some armor protection. American test pilots who flew captured Hayates were impressed. It could match or exceed the performance of late-war American fighters. The problem? It arrived too late, in 1944, when Japan's manufacturing quality was collapsing and fuel was scarce. Poorly trained pilots in poorly maintained aircraft couldn't exploit its tremendous potential. Mitsubishi J2M Raiden. This was Japan's dedicated interceptor, designed specifically to destroy B-29 superfortresses. Stubby, powerful, and fast, the Raiden could climb rapidly to bomber altitudes. Its heavy armament of cannons could tear apart a B-29 with a short burst. But it was tricky to fly, with poor visibility and vicious stall characteristics that caught inexperienced pilots off guard. The Raiden represented Japan's desperation. They needed something that could reach the B-29s before they obliterated Japanese cities. It worked when it could catch them, but there were never enough to make a difference. Kawasaki Ki-100. Here's one of history's happy accidents. When Kawasaki couldn't get enough German inline engines for the Ki-61, they stuck a radial engine on the airframe instead. The result was magnificent. The Ki-100 was one of the finest fighters Japan ever produced, combining excellent performance with reliability. American pilots reported it was a tough opponent, maneuverable and well-armed. Tragically for Japan, it entered service in 1945 when the war was already lost. Only 396 were built, but pilots loved it, calling it the best fighter they'd ever flown. Nakajima Kai-44 Shoki. The Demon, built for speed and climb rate rather than maneuverability. This was radical for Japan, their first fighter that prioritized interception over dogfighting. It was fast, it climbed like a rocket, and it was sturdy enough for head-on attacks against bombers. Japanese pilots initially hated it. Trained for turning fights, they found the Shoki unfamiliar and heavy on the controls. But in the interceptor role against B-24s and B-25s, it proved deadly effective, its heavy armament shredding bomber formations. Carrier-based fighters. Mitsubishi A5M. Before the Zero, there was the A5M. This was the world's first all-metal monoplane carrier fighter, and it established Japanese naval aviation as a force to be reckoned with. Over China, the A5M dominated, achieving air superiority wherever it flew. It was nimble, reliable, and gave Japanese pilots the confidence that would carry into the Pacific War. By 1941, it was obsolescent, relegated to training duties, but some still served in second-line roles throughout the war, particularly in the home islands. Kawanishi N1KJ Shiden. Originally designed as a floatplane fighter, Kawanishi converted it to a land-based interceptor, and the result was extraordinary. The N1KJ was one of the few Japanese fighters that could take on late-war American aircraft as equals. It was fast, maneuverable, heavily armed, and finally incorporated automatic combat flaps that maintained optimal performance throughout dogfights. U.S. Navy pilots learned to respect the Shiden. It was dangerous and could hold its own against Hellcats and Corsairs. But complex manufacturing meant only about 1,400 were built. Too few. Too late to change anything. Mitsubishi A7M Reppu. This was supposed to be the Zero's replacement, a next-generation carrier fighter with better speed, armor, and firepower while maintaining the Zero's legendary agility. The A7M was impressive in testing, exceeding all expectations. But engine problems plagued development, and B-29 raids on factories meant it never reached production. Only 9 were completed before war's end. It represented what might have been a glimpse of Japanese aviation's potential that circumstances never allowed to flourish. Bomber aircraft. Mitsubishi G4M. Allied pilots called it the one-shot lighter because it burst into flames so easily. The G4M was Japan's principal land-based bomber, with incredible range that allowed it to strike targets across vast Pacific distances. But that range came at a cost. No armor, no self-sealing tanks, just fuel and more fuel. The G4M could reach Guadalcanal from Rabaul, but the return trip was often one way. It carried the torpedoes that sank the HMS Prince of Wales and Repulse, Japan's first great naval victory. Yet hundreds of G4Ms and their crews were lost to defensive fire. They simply couldn't survive. Nakajima B-5N. This was the torpedo bomber that devastated Pearl Harbor. The B-5N was obsolete by 1941 standards, a fixed-gear design that looked antiquated compared to sleek modern aircraft. But it worked, and it worked brilliantly. Reliable, stable, and capable of accurate torpedo or level bombing attacks, the B-5N sank more Allied warships than any other Axis aircraft. At Pearl Harbor, B-5Ns delivered the killing blows to the battleships. At Midway, they sank the Yorktown. The B-5N wasn't glamorous, but it was brutally effective in skilled hands. Yokosuka D-4Y Suisei. Japan's fastest carrier bomber, the Suisei was sleek and beautiful. Designed as a dive bomber, it could reach speeds comparable to some fighters, giving it a fighting chance against interceptors. The D-4Y participated in nearly every major carrier battle of the late war, from the Philippine Sea to Leyte Gulf. Its speed gave it a better chance of survival than older, slower types. But by 1944, American fighter defenses and radar made any Japanese bomber's mission nearly suicidal, regardless of performance. Nakajima B-5N Tenzan. The successor to the B-5N, The Tenzan was a better aircraft in almost every way: faster, more powerful, better armed. But it arrived when Japan's carriers were being sunk one by one, and most Tenzans operated from land bases instead. The B-6N suffered from engine reliability issues that plagued many late-war Japanese aircraft. At Leyte Gulf, Tenzans participated in the last great carrier battles, but by then, overwhelming American forces made individual aircraft quality almost irrelevant. Yokosuka P-1Y Ginga. One of Japan's best bomber designs, the Ginga was fast enough to outrun many fighters and had better defensive armament than earlier types. It could serve as a level bomber, torpedo bomber, or night fighter. The P-1Y represented a maturing of Japanese bomber design, finally incorporating lessons learned from years of combat. But like so many late-war Japanese aircraft, production problems and fuel shortages meant it never fulfilled its potential. Mitsubishi Ki-67 Hiryu. The Flying Dragon was arguably Japan's finest bomber of the war. Fast, well-armed, and finally incorporating armor and self-sealing fuel tanks, the Ki-67 could actually survive battle damage. It performed well in every role: level bombing, torpedo attack, and even as a kamikaze carrier. American intelligence rated it as the best Japanese bomber they'd encountered. If Japan had prioritized survivability earlier, aircraft like the Hiryu might have been available when they could have made a difference. Dive bombers. Aichi D-3A. At Pearl Harbor and in the Indian Ocean, the D-3A was the most accurate dive bomber in the world. Its pilots trained relentlessly, and they could put a bomb down a battleship's funnel. The D-3A sank more Allied warships than any other Axis aircraft in the war's first year. It was the backbone of Japanese carrier striking power, reliable and deadly in expert hands. But it was slow, vulnerable, and by 1943, losses mounted catastrophically. Still, the D-3A had earned its place in history at Pearl Harbor and Ceylon. Yokosuka D-4Y Suisei. Already mentioned in bombers, but worth noting, the D-4Y served primarily as a dive bomber. Its speed made it superior to the D-3A in the dangerous environment of 1944-45, though nothing could truly protect Japanese bombers by that late stage of the war. Reconnaissance Aircraft. Mitsubishi Ki-46. This aircraft was so fast and flew so high that Allied fighters struggled to intercept it. The Ki-46 was Japan's premier strategic reconnaissance aircraft, its sleek design and powerful engines allowing it to photograph enemy installations with near impunity through much of the war. Even when Allied fighters did catch it, the Ki-46's speed often allowed escape. Late in the war, some were converted to high-altitude interceptors, their speed and ceiling making them effective against B-29s. Nakajima C-6N Sayun. Designed specifically for carrier-based reconnaissance, the Sayun was incredibly fast, reportedly the fastest single-engine aircraft in the Imperial Japanese Navy. It could outrun most fighters sent to intercept it. The irony was that by the time it entered service, Japan had few carriers left to operate from. Most Sayuns flew from land bases, their exceptional performance wasted in a losing cause. Flying boats and seaplanes. Kawanishi H-8K. The largest and longest-ranged flying boat of WWII, the H-8K was magnificent. Allied pilots who encountered it were shocked by its defensive armament, speed, and ability to absorb punishment. The H-8K could patrol for over 24 hours, covering vast stretches of the Pacific. It was so well built that one captured example impressed American engineers with its construction quality. Only 167 were built due to its complexity, but it represented Japanese engineering at its finest. Kawanishi H-6K. The predecessor to the H-8K, the H-6K was slower and more vulnerable, but served throughout the war. These flying boats conducted long-range patrols, maritime reconnaissance, and even bombing missions. An H-6K spotted the American carriers at Midway, though the warning came too late. They operated across the Pacific, from the Aleutians to the Indian Ocean, enduring missions that tested crew endurance to its limits. Aichi E-13A, the eyes of the Japanese fleet, the E-13A was a float plane launched from cruisers and battleships. Slow and vulnerable, it nonetheless performed vital reconnaissance missions throughout the war. An E-13A scouted Pearl Harbor before the attack, confirming the American fleet was in port. These little float planes operated in incredibly dangerous conditions, launched by catapult and recovered by crane, all while enemy fighters searched for them. Nakajima A6M2N. Take a 0, add floats, and you get this unique fighter. The A6M2N defended isolated seaplane bases and island garrisons where airfields couldn't be built. It retained much of the Zero's maneuverability despite the drag from floats. These floatplane fighters operated in the Aleutians, the Solomons, and across the Pacific, providing air defense where no other fighter could operate. Mitsubishi F-1M. A biplane in WWII seems absurd, yet the F-1M served throughout the entire war. Catapulted from battleships and cruisers, these little biplanes performed reconnaissance, artillery spotting, and even light bombing. They were obsolete, sure, but reliable and simple. Some F-1Ms survived until August 1945, a testament to their utility despite outdated design. Attack and ground support aircraft. Nakajima B-5N. Already covered as a torpedo bomber, but the B-5N also served extensively in level bombing and close support roles, its versatility making it invaluable despite its obsolescence. Aichi B-7A Ryusei. This should have been Japan's ultimate carrier attack aircraft, combining dive bombing, torpedo attack, and fighter capabilities in one airframe. The B-7A was powerful, fast, and well-armed. But it arrived in 1944, when Japan's carriers were gone. Most operated from land bases, and chronic engine problems limited their effectiveness. Another case of brilliant design. Terrible timing. Yokosuka MXY-7, Oka, the ultimate kamikaze weapon, a rocket-powered suicide bomb with stubby wings. The Oka was carried beneath a G4M bomber and released near its target, accelerating to over 600 km/h in its final dive. It represented desperation and fanaticism. Young pilots sitting in what was essentially a guided bomb. American ships learned to shoot down the mother bombers before they could release their deadly cargo. The Oka symbolized how far Japan had fallen, sacrificing pilots and weapons with no possibility of return. Training and utility aircraft. Tachikawa Ki-9. Japan's primary basic trainer throughout the war, the Ki-9 introduced thousands of pilots to flying. It was simple, forgiving, and reliable, exactly what a trainer should be. As the war progressed and Japan grew desperate for pilots, training time in aircraft like the Ki-9 was cut drastically, sending inadequately prepared pilots into combat. Tachikawa Ki-55. An advanced trainer based on the Ki-9 used to transition pilots from basic trainers to operational aircraft. The Ki-55 helped prepare pilots for more complex fighters and bombers, though like all Japanese training programs, it was overwhelmed by wartime demands. Kokusai Ki-76, Japan's liaison and observation aircraft, similar to the American L-4 Grasshopper. The Ki-76 could operate from tiny airstrips, serving as an artillery spotter, courier, and general utility aircraft. It represented the unglamorous but essential aircraft that kept armies functioning. Mitsubishi Ki-57. A military transport version of a civilian airliner, the Ki-57 carried troops, cargo, and wounded across Japan's far-flung empire. As Japan's situation deteriorated, these transports flew increasingly dangerous missions, many shot down by prowling Allied fighters. They were vital, but vulnerable. From the elegant Zero that dominated the war's early years to the desperate kamikaze aircraft of its final days, Japanese aviation traveled a tragic arc. These aircraft and their crews fought with skill and courage, but industrial might and resources ultimately decided the Pacific War's outcome. Nakajima Ki-115 Tsurugi, desperation made metal. The Tsurugi was designed as a disposable kamikaze aircraft, so simple it could be built by unskilled workers. It had no landing gear, just skids for takeoff, because it was never coming back. Thankfully, the war ended before many were completed. The Ki-115 represented the darkest depths of Japan's situation, building aircraft specifically designed to kill their pilots. Yokosuka MXY-7, Oka. Already mentioned, but worth emphasizing, this rocket-powered suicide bomb represented both Japanese technical ingenuity and the horrifying waste of trained pilots in desperation attacks.